But what about button 1? Let's make sure that we have button 1 where we want it, 12 pixels to the left of button 2. And what about the size of button 1? Do we want to keep it where it's at? Do we want to set it to the same size as button 2? And we can do that with these equal widths and equal heights constraints that we saw earlier, and holding shift to select both of those. Now you can see that it is assuming with this dashed yellow line that button 1 should be the same size as button 2, and since we haven't set constraints for the placement of button 1 on the view, it's assuming that it's going to be at 0, 0, which we will fix in just a second. And then these little badges with plus values going on here says that the actual width of button 1 is 69 pixels less than what our constraints are telling it to be, and same with the height, but 28 pixels less than what the constraints are telling it to be. But what if we want to just keep button 1 to the same height and width that it is now, and we can go down again and check these height and width boxes and add those constraints to button 1. And we can see over here in these warnings and errors for this scene in the view controller that button 1 needs constraints for its X position and button 1 needs its constraints for its Y position. So it's expecting it to be the size that we set, but that its X and Y are going to be at 0, 0, like we see here with this dashed yellow line. But what if we don't want button 1 to be titled button 1? What if we want it to be titled button 1,000,000? We can see that then the button title gets clipped and is shortened with this ellipsis here to say that the title at its current font size and font cannot fit in the frame size of the button in this current context. So how about we select this width constraint and set its relationship to be greater than or equal to 55? So actually what we can see with this dashed line again is that since we don't have constraints for the position yet with button 1,000,000, that it's assuming it's at 0, 0 still, but the size has adjusted to fit the content because we said that the width of button 1,000,000 can actually be greater than 55. And in its current state, it is at least greater than or equal to 55. If we shortened it, it's going to complain. It's 7 pixels shorter than 55 pixels. So let's undo that. And we can actually increase the width to fit button 1,000,000 as best as we can, or however we were wanting to button 1,000,000 so that all the text does fit in the button. We can see that it's now 126 pixels wide, but there's no complaining going on because it is at least 55 pixels wide. And again, this is just an example. We could be basing the width of this button off its text like we're doing now. We could be setting it at a fixed width. We could be setting it to calculate its size based on the current canvas. Maybe if the view is smaller, then we want the button width to be smaller. And there are ways to do that, but this is just this introduction for this example. We need to make sure that iOS is going to calculate the Y position for this button correctly to be centered vertically in the container. So one way we can do that again is right-clicking and dragging to the view and choosing center horizontally in container. Or another cooler thing we can do, because really what we are wanting is to keep these two buttons aligned next to each other. So we're going to right-click and drag from button 1,000,000 to button 2 and choose center Y. So what that means is it's going to make sure that the center Y value of button 1,000,000 is equal to the center Y value of button 2. So we'll select that, and now we can see that this dash yellow line has moved to the correct Y value to be equal with button 2. Something to point out again was that that menu was context sensitive, so if we move button 1,000,000 under there, we could actually select the center X to be equal with button 2. But we don't want to do that. We don't want them to be stacked on top of each other with the center Y and center X equal to each other. So now all that is left to do is to make sure that button 1,000,000 lays itself out 12 pixels to the left of button 2. So we have covered this, and normally what you would do with a frame-based layout is maybe you would get the X position of button 2 and then subtract 12 and then subtract the width of button 1,000,000, or maybe you would place it so many pixels from the left of the screen, but then it might not always be 12 pixels from button 2 based on the current environment that you're in and the real estate that you have to work with. So again, from the last video, we're going to drag from button 1,000,000 to button 2. Select horizontal spacing. Again, that will select the two closest attributes from both items. So the trailing attribute of button 1,000,000, which is the same as the right attribute, and the leading attribute from button 2, which is the same as the left attribute. And then again, we can go over to that specific constraint, trailing space to button 2, and change that constant to 12. Press enter, and now our constraints are all laid out so that the content will display how we want it to display. But there is one problem. Up here there's still a warning that says that the constrained width of the button does not match what it is in the storyboard. It's in the same with the X value. And actually both of those are stemming off of the width constraint, and what Xcode is actually doing here is that it is calculating the exact minimum width that we need in this button to display the text. So one way we can do is we can click this yellow triangle and it'll give us some options for Xcode to automatically fix some problems here using some different processes, and we can go through those to see if any of them actually work for us. Or we can also do this manually and set the width to 123 as your device is going to expect it to be. So we'll just bring that down to 123, and now the X value is off and you can see that it's looking for 108. So we can just type 108 here and the view will change on the scene according to this current frame value. But how about we try this way now, and we can say update frame and that'll move it to the right. Or what if we selected update constraints? If we select update constraints, it's actually going to change this trailing space value to equal 20. But that's not what we're looking for, so again we can go down here and change that to 12 and the view will adjust accordingly. And now on any screen size, button 2 is going to be centered at this size. Button 1,000,000 is going to be centered with as short of a width as possible while fitting its text, but at least 55 pixels wide and 12 pixels to the left of button 2. And as long as this is the desired effect, we never have to touch these constraints again. And again, this is just an example, hopefully showing you some of the how of Autolayout. If you know how to use Autolayout after watching this, then I must have done a really good job and this must have been a great example. But I don't expect you to know anything more than just to get started with it. But hopefully that this can get you started with it or get you a long way. Thanks for watching.